Every day she'd wake up and realize someone had called today to tell her mother had passed away. And her mother died every day for like 3 years.
For decades, Jay Leno has been one of the most recognizable and trusted faces in American entertainment. With his signature chin, effortless humor, and warm, comforting presence, he built a career that felt unshakable. No matter how chaotic the world became, Jay Leno was always there, steady, smiling, and ready with a joke to make everything feel just a little bit lighter. But now, everything has changed. In a shocking and heartbreaking moment, Jay Leno has just broken news that has left millions stunned. What he revealed only moments ago isn't funny, isn't lighthearted, and isn't something his fans ever imagined they would hear from him. For a man who built a career on laughter, this revelation is darker and far more devastating than anything he has ever faced publicly. The comedian who once stood center stage under the bright lights of late night television is now confronting a reality that no joke can soften. And as the truth pours out, fans are realizing that behind that iconic smile was a struggle far deeper and more frightening than anyone suspected. Those who know Jay personally say they've never seen him like this, somber, vulnerable, and visibly shaken. The news he has delivered affects not just his life, but also the people closest to him. It's a revelation that forces him to confront mortality, legacy, and the possibility that his life will never be the same again. This is the horrifying news Jay Leno has just shared, and the emotional, painful story behind it. When Jay Leno appeared on camera just moments ago, fans immediately sensed something was wrong. His familiar smile was gone, replaced with a tension in his eyes that even years of polished television experience couldn't hide. Jay has always been the guy who walks into a room and instantly lifts the mood, but this time, he looked like he was carrying the weight of something unbearable. There was no studio, no bright lights, no audience laughter, just Jay sitting in a quiet room, speaking directly from the heart. He took a long breath, one that almost seemed to tremble, before finally revealing the horrifying news he had kept private for far too long. What he announced was not just a personal crisis. It was a battle he's been fighting behind the scenes, hidden carefully beneath his upbeat personality and tireless work ethic. Jay explained that after months of unexplained symptoms, fatigue, and doctor visits, he had received a diagnosis that left him stunned. The once unstoppable, always on the move comedian suddenly found himself facing the one thing he never expected: a serious medical condition that could change the course of his life forever. Jay admitted that he had tried to push through it at first, classic Leno behavior. He continued working on cars in his garage, kept performing stand-up shows, and even filmed new projects, hoping the symptoms would pass on their own. But they didn't. Instead, they worsened. And Jay finally realized he couldn't hide from the truth anymore. As he spoke, it became clear this wasn't just a physical struggle. Jay has always defined himself by movement, by working, creating, staying busy. To be forced to slow down, to face vulnerability, to confront the possibility of losing the very lifestyle that gives him purpose. That was the true horror behind his revelation. Friends close to Jay say the past few months have been some of the most difficult of his entire life. Between doctor visits, medical tests, and nights spent awake wondering what the future might hold, Jay battled fear in a way he never had before. And for a man who has spent his life relying on humor to carry him through tough situations, finding himself unable to laugh through this one was a shock he never saw coming. He explained that the scariest part wasn't the diagnosis itself, but the moment he realized that he could no longer pretend everything was fine. For a public figure who always made others feel good, admitting he wasn't okay felt like a personal failure, even though it was anything but. As Jay finished speaking, his voice cracked. It was brief but unmistakable. The emotion he had been holding back finally slipped through the cracks, revealing a side of him the world has almost never seen. Fans immediately flooded social media with prayers, support, and messages of love, but nothing could change the fact that Jay's life had just taken a terrifying turn. The announcement was only the beginning. The full story behind Jay Leno's horrifying revelation runs far deeper, and the consequences of it are already unfolding. Long before Jay Leno revealed the horrifying news to the public, he had already been fighting a private battle, one that only a handful of people even knew existed. To the outside world, Jay remained the same energetic, unstoppable workhorse he had always been. Fans saw him performing stand-up shows, smiling at car events, tinkering in his garage, and appearing on television as if nothing were wrong. But behind that carefully maintained image was a man quietly unraveling. It began subtly, little things Jay brushed off as getting older, fatigue that clung to him like a weight, moments of dizziness he dismissed as dehydration, pain he waved away with a joke. Jay Leno has always been stubbornly self-reliant, the kind of man who avoids doctors until he has no other choice. So instead of slowing down, he pushed harder. Instead of resting, he filled his schedule even more. Instead of listening to his body, he drowned out its warnings with busyness. But his closest friends could see the shift. They noticed how Jay began canceling the occasional appearance, something he'd rarely done in his entire career. They saw how he paused more between jokes, how he'd lean against a table to steady himself, how he'd rub his hands together when the pain returned. At first, they chalked it up to exhaustion. Jay has always worked at a pace no one his age could keep up with. But soon, the signs were too consistent and too alarming to ignore. Still, Jay insisted everything was fine. It wasn't until one frightening night in his garage that reality finally caught up with him. While working on one of his beloved classic cars, Jay suddenly felt his legs weaken. His vision blurred, and he collapsed onto the cold concrete floor. For several minutes, he couldn't stand. He couldn't speak. He couldn't even call for help. That moment terrified him more than anything he had faced in his decades-long career. When he finally told his wife, Mavis, what happened, she insisted he see a doctor immediately. Jay resisted out of fear, out of pride, out of the belief that he could push through it the same way he pushed through everything else in life. But the next morning, he woke up feeling worse, and the fear he had tried to bury finally surfaced. At the hospital, Jay underwent a series of tests, long, exhausting, invasive tests that forced him to confront the possibility that something was truly wrong. He tried to keep his spirits high, cracking jokes with the nurses, brushing off his worry with humor. But when the doctor returned with the results, the tone in the room changed instantly. Jay wasn't prepared for the words he heard. No amount of humor could soften the blow. His greatest fear had become a reality, and yet he kept the diagnosis to himself. For weeks, Jay tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. He continued performing, continued working on cars, continued presenting a brave face. But every day grew harder. Every symptom intensified. And every attempt to keep the truth hidden pushed him closer to breaking. His friends urged him to step back. His wife begged him to rest. Even fellow comedians noticed something was wrong. But Jay kept insisting he was fine until his body made it impossible to keep pretending. When he finally decided to speak publicly, it wasn't because he wanted sympathy. It was because he could no longer hide the truth. The battle he'd been fighting in silence was over. Now, the world knew. His horrifying diagnosis was only part of the story. What it meant for his future was far more devastating. Jay Leno has always been known for his humor, charm, and seemingly endless energy. But behind that charismatic exterior is a man who has spent decades carrying burdens most fans will never see. The diagnosis he revealed so suddenly isn't just a physical challenge. It is a reckoning that has tested his emotional and mental strength in ways few could imagine. For years, Jay built his life around work. From his early stand-up days to hosting The Tonight Show for decades, he poured himself into the craft of entertaining millions. The audience, the applause, the cameras, these were his constants. Yet the same dedication that made him beloved also isolated him. Long hours, constant travel, and the pressures of live television left little room for reflection or self-care. He rarely spoke about the toll it took, and even less about the exhaustion that came from trying to appear uncheckable to a nation of fans. The diagnosis brought all of that into sharp focus. Suddenly, the invincibility he had built over decades was gone. He had to confront not only the physical limitations, but also the emotional strain of fearing what the future might hold. The man who once carried the laughter of millions on his shoulders now faced nights of uncertainty, grappling with the fragility of his own body and the unpredictability of life. Jay admitted that his mental health suffered more than most could understand. The constant worry about his career, legacy, and family intertwined with the fear of his condition progressing faster than he could manage. There were nights he struggled to sleep, haunted by what-ifs he could not control. Even in moments of levity, a shadow lingered, reminding him that the fight ahead would be long and relentless. His family, friends, and colleagues have been his support system, but even their presence cannot erase the reality of what he faces alone. Jay often reflects on his life in solitude, replaying decades of moments, successes, failures, laughter, and regrets. The diagnosis has forced him to acknowledge vulnerabilities he had long ignored, showing a side of the man that the public rarely, if ever, sees. Moreover, fame has added a unique pressure. Unlike private individuals facing health crises, Jay's struggles are magnified by public attention. Every rumor, speculation, and headline weighs heavily. While fans send support and love, the constant scrutiny adds a layer of stress that most patients never experience. Even joking about his condition is difficult. His humor, once his shield, now feels fragile when confronting such a serious reality. Yet, amid the fear and uncertainty, Jay Leno's resilience remains. He has faced the reality of mortality, recognized the depth of his vulnerability, and begun preparing for the challenges ahead. The world may see him as the eternal entertainer, but inside, he is navigating a deeply personal battle, one that tests not just his body, but his spirit, identity, and the life he has built over decades. This is the part of his story few expected, the moment when the laughter stops, the spotlight dims, and Jay Leno confronts the truth behind the headlines. His life is forever changed, and the path forward will be difficult, emotional, and profoundly human. As Jay Leno confronts the reality of his diagnosis, he is taking steps to navigate what may be the most challenging chapter of his life. For a man who has spent decades commanding attention, telling stories, and making millions laugh, this moment requires a different kind of courage, a quiet, reflective strength that cannot be measured in ratings or applause. Jay has made it clear that he is not giving up. Instead, he is learning to accept his limitations while focusing on the things that matter most: family, friends, and the simple joys of life that often go unnoticed in the hustle of fame. The late nights under studio lights, the pressure to perform, and the relentless schedule that once defined him are now being replaced with quieter, more personal priorities. Every day is approached with intention, each moment cherished because he knows how fragile life can be. Family has become his anchor. Jay leans on his wife Mavis, whose steadfast support has been unwavering, and their children, who provide love, humor, and grounding in a world suddenly uncertain. Friends who have known him for decades have stepped in as pillars of strength, offering guidance, compassion, and companionship during this profoundly difficult time. For Jay, These relationships are now the core of his existence, the true measures of what matters when fame and fortune recede into the chin of the Falun, the core of his existence, the true measures of what matters when fame and fortune recede into the peon. Background. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Jay also reflects on the legacy he leaves behind. Unlike many celebrities, his impact is not confined to awards or accolades. It is found in the laughter he sparked across generations, in the countless lives he touched through his comedy, and in the example he set as a man who built his career with integrity, dedication, and an uncheckable work ethic. His fans, colleagues, and fellow comedians recognize that the true Jay Leno is not merely the host, the performer, or the public persona, but a deeply human individual who faced every challenge with humor and heart. In private moments, Jay contemplates the possibility of saying goodbye, an idea that terrifies him yet also inspires reflection. He considers the lessons he wants to impart: resilience, kindness, and the importance of embracing life fully, even when it is uncertain. He hopes that by sharing his journey, others may find courage in their own battles, understanding that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the willingness to confront it head-on. Yet even as he faces this personal storm, Jay maintains a spark of hope. He continues to joke lightly, smile when he can, and find moments of levity in the smallest of experiences. This balance between seriousness and humor, between reflection and joy, is what has defined him throughout his life, and it will guide him now. Jay Leno's story is more than a public figure confronting a tragic diagnosis. It is a testament to the human spirit, the capacity to endure, to adapt, and to cherish the connections and experiences that truly matter. His fans will remember him not just for his jokes, his energy, or his television presence, but for the resilience, authenticity, and courage he demonstrates when facing life's most difficult challenges. As he continues forward, Jay Leno is quietly preparing for whatever comes next, holding on to hope, leaning on love, and showing the world that even in the face of terrifying uncertainty, it is possible to live with dignity, strength, and heart. His farewell is not just about leaving the spotlight, it is about embracing life fully until the very last moment, leaving behind a legacy that transcends fame and touches the soul of everyone who has ever been inspired by his work.